Welcome to Module 3, where you will learn how to attract high-end clients. In the previous module, you dealt with the planning part of your webinar. Now it's time to start thinking about how will the people come to know about your webinar. This task that stands tall before us is going to take some ingenuity and smart work on your part. Of course, the technology is available for you to make it work effectively. Ask yourself, who is your target audience? The people who will get attracted to your webinar will mainly be those who are either striving to develop their career in that field, or people who are interested in giving their career a push to increase revenue. There may also be highly experienced professionals who are just looking for new ideas and different perspectives. After gaining a new insight into their field of expertise, the ideas presented in your webinar should be such that these people are able to mold them into their own style. To begin with, you should have in mind the number of participants who will attend to your webinar. If this is your first webinar ever, then you may want to start with a small number of participants. As you gain confidence and a little more experience, you can increase the number of people who will attend it. Let's see what else will be required to have your webinar known to everyone. What is the aim of your webinar? What does it want to convey, and with whom do you want to share it? These are the questions which will lead you to ways which can help your approach and attract the right audience. For instance, if your webinar is about adventure sports, then the target audience includes everyone in the world. Of course it is, with the prerequisite that the person has knowledge of surfing and working on the internet. It could include people who are interested in adventure activities such as rafting, kayaking, trekking, and so on. There will be people who may be interested in making a career out of it. Now it depends on the purpose of your webinar, whether it is aimed towards helping people and make a career out of adventure sports or simply sharing the information. Even though your webinar includes both these purposes, then your target audience will be large in number. The audience may include business owners, entrepreneurs, or adventure sports enthusiasts. If you want to invite all of these to your webinar, then the approach will have to be different for each. For people interested in adventure, the sample webinar may be designed in a way that emphasizes on talent and hunger for adventure sports. Whereas business owners, it may be designed in a way that emphasizes on profit, sales, innovative ideas for their line of business. For a start, you can create a website that features your achievements, your aim, how will your webinar help people, what's in it for them, and lastly, it should contain a trial pack of your webinar. This trial pack should be kept free of charge. A page in the website should also invite people to register free of charge and give their reviews on the webinar. After a few people have gone through it, they will be interested in gaining further knowledge about your webinar. The webinar should create some kind of inquisitiveness as well as adequate interest in them, so that they will be keen on taking the next step. You need to remember that the first impression is the last impression, and therefore the content that you present the first time should be interesting and should end with a word or two about how they can gather more information and benefit much more if they enroll to your paid courses. When you make your webinar a paid one, you can change the perspective of your participants about your webinar. Imagine yourself signing up for a free webinar and then imagine it when you're signing up for a paid one. Is your point of view and the level of seriousness the same in both cases? Of course not. You immediately go into the line of thinking that the one which is free can be missed, but the one you've paid for cannot be missed because you have paid your hard-earned money for it. Similarly, another thing in which the participant's point of view differs is that they perceive the paid one to be of higher value than the one which is free of cost. Well, most of us would think that way. People will also take the paid webinar more seriously than the one that's free. That's simple human psychology. Let's consider a situation where you have offered a free webinar in an attempt to enhance your business. What do you think is your unique selling point? Have you included a glimpse of it in the free webinar? If yes, then what does it convey? Do you think it will catch everyone's attention and also create a stir in the prospective participants? These are some important answers to which will decide the number of people that sign up and the turnout on the day of your webinar. Your basic aim of offering the free webinar should be to generate curiosity and interest that it prompts the person to register for your webinar, especially the paid one. The free webinar is an attempt on your part to form the first impression, so you need to make the most of it. It should be so impressive and have such an impact that even someone not from that particular field should have the urge to know more about it. Your initial few slides and the slides at the end need to be very impactful. For instance, if your webinar is about interior decoration, then the first as well as the last few slides should explain how your webinar can add value to their business in terms of sales, revenue, expansion, and so on. How about making a brief but a great video which serves as an introduction to your webinar? This can contain such details which will immediately make people feel like registering for your webinar. This can include things such as what all they will learn and how they can apply it to their field of business. Creating a video is a great way of creating the enthusiasm required for people to register for your webinar. Your enthusiasm should show in the video. That's the most important thing to do because enthusiasm is indeed contagious. If required, make a role play a part of the video which can effectively demonstrate how a person can benefit from your webinar. If there are people who have actually followed strategies you believe in, then have their review shown in the video. Once you have been able to create the enthusiasm it is necessary to not let the momentum just fly past you without making the most of it. What is meant by this is that now your actual webinar should be so good that it justifies all the enthusiasm and also goes in accordance with what you and the others have said in the video. The webinar should be able to retain your participants and convert them into loyal customers. Now that you have understood the target audience, their line of thinking and the kind of actions you should take to attract the right people, you are ready to explore the various ways in which you can make your webinar known. Throughout the process, you should never lose sight of the main purpose of conducting your webinar. For instance, if the webinar is being conducted to promote the sales of your sports gear, then you have identified the target audience as people who are passionately involved in adventure activities or are themselves in the same business. Have you identified what you are good at? Is it blogging or social networking? Well, it's time to identify it and put your energy into it. The first step is to open your own blog and write about adventure sports. You can mention that you are conducting a webinar on the kind of sport gears required for all kinds of adventure activities. You can include all the special features of the webinar, which you think will arouse interest of people visiting your site. It is necessary to start your blog well in time so that people are able to follow your blog if they are keen on attending your webinar. You can cash in on the fact that many people search the news websites for information on various things. So, you could have a press release through any of the wire services such as the Business Wire. On such platforms, it is important to give information such as who exactly is the webinar for and what it is about. Because the search criteria that people use are specific and you need to use those specific words in the headline. Do you think that the younger people will be more attracted to your webinar? If that's the case, then you can promote the webinar through various social networking websites such as Facebook, Twitter, and so on. There are many microblogging services also which you can make use of. You can always use banner advertisements that can easily be displayed on websites related to the topics of your webinar. It would be a great idea to try link building. For instance, to promote your webinar about adventure sports gear, you can joint venture with a travel site for providing a link to your website, which gives them information about your webinar. The underlying logic of doing this is to attract those people to your webinar whose interests are already lies in the same direction. Of course, since this is going to be a paid initiative towards promoting your webinar, so you can decide whether it's worth it or not. This means that each sign-up will entail you paying up a commission to the affiliate website. There are other ways in which you can promote your webinar, such as putting posters or distributing flyers at shops, talking about it to everyone you meet, sending mails to people in your mailing list, sending it across your alumni, and so on. If you don't want to send a mail directly about the webinar, then you can write a short but catchy line about it in your signature line. Well, it is your ingenuity that will play a role here. You think you have done everything to promote your webinar, and the attendance is going to be 100%. That is only if the world was such a perfect place. While different people imply different lives and different priorities, you can expect at least 40 to 50% of people who will register but will not turn out on the day of the webinar. And here lies our challenge. So why not try and make the number of non-attendees lesser than that? After all, you have taken a lot of effort in planning, preparing, and promoting your webinar, haven't you? So you definitely deserve better. If your webinar is free, then you can expect attendance much lesser than the same for a paid one. The question is, what can you do to ensure that these people who have registered themselves turn up on that day? One way is to send reminder emails one day prior to the webinar. There are times when, in spite of reminder mails, people have not turned up. Then you can send a follow-up mail to those who could not come. This mail should contain information that was covered in the webinar, but in short. This mail should be more of a way to promote the webinar specifically to them, highlighting the main features of the webinar. You can also extend some incentives to these people for registering for the webinar again by a particular date, such as free consultations or CDs and other related material at a lower rate. Most of these methods should work well, considering the huge market covering the entire world. Whether you have a popular topic or an unusual subject, equipped with the right methods of promoting your webinar, you'll be assured of success. In the first module, we discussed about e-coaching, various ways to conduct one and how you and your clients can benefit from it. Let's now see how to plan your webinar. Planning is one of the crucial steps of the whole process. It will help you conduct your presentation efficiently and effectively without missing out on any important points. Planning will help you preempt the challenges that you might face midway through the webinar. For a start, it is necessary to decide as to what is that single most important point that you want to convey to the clients through your presentation. You may reiterate the purpose of the presentation to yourself during the planning stage. You need to sit and deliberately chalk out the plan, which will include certain critical issues, namely content of the presentation, schedule of the presentation, and resources that you will share with the clients. Once your planning is done, play it in your mind till you cover the webinar till the end. So how do you begin planning your presentation? The first point to consider is the subject matter that you want to convey, that is, the subject of your choice. But is the topic for the webinar interesting? This can be known by doing a little research. You can check out the market trends and then decide what type of content you would like for your webinar. You may be good in culinary skills or brand management, tourism or interior designing. A webinar can be prepared on anything you have knowledge in. The question is how passionate you are about sharing it with people who are willing to learn and explore. This needs to be identified, and then the next steps will follow much more smoothly, setting the right pace. Your enthusiasm will invariably reflect in your presentation in front of the clients, making your webinar more compelling. The content of the presentation needs to be with a purpose in mind. Your purpose will determine the way the presentation flows. Make sure your presentation starts with a brief introduction on the subject. It should be as short as possible. For instance, if you are making a presentation on organizational development, then the logical way to start would be to first define the concept of organizational development. You may then move on to explaining the types of organizational development interventions that are required to be taken in an organization. You must try and include some basic terminologies. That depends entirely on the capacity of your clients. What this means is you must gauge the level of knowledge that your clients have on the subject. If you don't know this aspect of your clients, forward a questionnaire before your webinar is scheduled to begin. The answers to this questionnaire will clearly tell you what your clients would like to know more about. You can then plan the content accordingly. Now you know what your clients are interested to know about. How do you start designing your presentation in view of this? This is an important question that you need to answer. Also, how are you going to start in a way that catches everyone's attention from the very beginning? You need to sit and think about this aspect deeply. The beginning should be something that is able to stir your clients from inside. Think of a beginning with a quote or an audio-visual slide which tells a humorous story, and then move on to apprise them of the benefits of the webinar. Think of this as a great experience for the participants. You can start off with the basics only if your clients are completely unaware of the subject. Ask yourself, do I understand what is important to them? This would require an understanding of the background of your clients. The answer to the questionnaire should help you out here. This will give you a fair idea of the level of awareness of your clients. There may be instances where your clients are experienced professionals and aware of the basic concept. In that case, do not dwell too much on the basics. Simply include them in your introduction of the subject. If you start discussing something which they already know, then you will not only waste their time on all the unimportant and relevant points, but also end up losing your credibility. It is very important to relate the concepts mentioned in the introduction. Imagine yourself sitting and listening to the webinar when you review the content. How does it sound to you? Think like your client. Is it comprehensive enough? If not, what is it that you can improve or modify to make better? Adding instances which your client can relate to can be one point to consider. Simply filling your presentation with information is not enough. You must elaborate on each point by giving relevant examples to make them easy to understand. Examples prove to be really impactful when they are relatable. Think of a scenario where the points are not in sequence. How will this impact the audience? Won't they get confused? Well, yes, sure they will. So, make sure that the important points are positioned in a logical manner, so that the next point builds up on the previous one. This would help you convey your core message effectively. At the same time, it will help your clients grasp the main points. The points that should be organized in a manner that allows you to elaborate and give emphasis on the most important thought or idea. Each small point should invariably lead to the focus of the presentation. Just as you begin, continue with the same tempo. The conclusion of the presentation should also be made interesting, that it provides the punch to make the final impact on the audience. If in a feedback the clients remember the points you made, then you can rest assured that your webinar has been impactful. Wouldn't it be good if we can rewind ourselves, modify our words, and play with ourselves again? Well, since this is not going to happen, you might as well consider doing things right the first time. If your preparation hasn't been thorough, then this should not be a problem. Time is something which is not in our control. So let's now see how we can plan the webinar according to the available time. It is not the time that will adjust to your presentation, but it is the presentation that needs to be planned. Make sure you schedule it in such a manner that you are able to cover all the relevant points in the given time. Now that you have decided what points you are going to cover, the next step is to assign time and minutes to each point. Just try to think which point should come first and which one should follow. You can rate the points from the most important point to the least important and assign them accordingly. Some points may warrant examples while others may not. You can keep examples ready for a lot of subtopics which are covered in your presentation. This will come in very handy when you are falling short of time. For instance, if someone does not understand a concept when you explained it, and you know that time is running out, then a simple example will help you in making your client understand quickly. So you think only actors require rehearsals? Well, think again. Rehearsal or practice, in other words, should be done only because you don't want to fall short of your own potential and the audience's expectations. It is a good idea to rehearse once or twice after the content of your presentation is ready. This should be done with a watch kept close by so that you can keep track of the time and change things where you think you are taking more time than required. At the same time, the presentation should not be completed before the scheduled time. If this happens, then it will give your clients the idea that there is no value addition being done to your presentation. The clients may actually end up losing interest in it altogether. How is your thought process? Are some preconceived ideas on your mind about the previous set of clients? This is another checkpoint for you. Just because it took longer for the previous batch to understand a point from your presentation doesn't mean this batch is also going to take the same amount of time. It is necessary to think afresh because these clients are new and different. Rely on what the clients have shared with you about their backgrounds rather than allowing your judgments about them to prevail. The last thing you need to keep in mind about time is that the duration of your webinar should not be too long or too short. It is not necessary to cover everything about the subject in one presentation. Imagine yourself being subjected to a presentation which has been rushed, and there is nothing that you would have been able to absorb. You are definitely not likely to come back to a presentation like that. Instead, you can divide it into 2 webinars if need be. This is because the attention span of a person is limited, and if the person goes on for too long, then your clients are likely to lose interest. You should be able to strike a balance between the content being shared and the time taken to share it. At the very beginning of the webinar, It is important to make each person feel that their presence is important to you. If you start the presentation with this thought in mind, then making the session interactive will be an easy job. If you're simply going to rattle on the topics one by one, then it will not register in the minds of your clients. By the end of it, they will not have learned what they had in mind. Instead, they will be frustrated. Whereas if you encourage their participation, they will feel valued and will want to contribute more. In the first 15 minutes, you will be able to recognize as to what has kept the interest of your clients till now. Use an appropriate strategy in accordance to keep their interest. You can include small, easy exercises to emphasize on points included in your presentation, or have the clients answer a questionnaire. You can ask them questions so that they start thinking on the subject deeply. If you think that the group is capable of answering difficult questions, then you can ask such questions. Do not ignore anyone's questions or inputs. Appreciate the person who gives a good input or asks a good question. This will definitely help them know that their input matters. Let's consider a situation where your presentation is likely to overshoot the specified time. You can end by saying that the next topic will be covered in the next session. This is a more dignified way of ending the presentation rather than spoiling it by trying to stuff everything in the presentation just because the clients asked too many questions or because you lost track of time. Won't you feel good if you were asked about your views on the session you attended? Sure you will. So don't wait. Use the software to take a feedback of the clients and the extent to which they have benefited from it. The last 5 minutes may also be kept for a quick review of the topics discussed in the session. Their answers will indicate whether you have done any value addition or just about repeating things that the clients already knew. The resources you choose for your webinar depends on whether you are starting off or already established in this business. In case you don't have a website of your own, you can explore your options on a number of online conference websites. This will automatically have you registered on the website and make the invitation to your potential clients. However, in case you have a website, getting webinar software would be a good idea. Let's see how these options work. In case you decided to register with a website offering scheduling and planning services for the webinar, the clients will use the registration forms to apply for your webinar. This will be followed by automated reminders to the clients as the date of the webinar approaches. If you are completely new to it, then you can have a mock setup practice before actually registering to the website. Once this is done, go ahead and practice your presentation using the website before you deliver it for your clients. If you do not feel confident with the virtual setup immediately, you can request someone from your family or friends to act like a client and have the webinar presented to him or her. You can then ask them to give you genuine feedback on whether you are going too slow or too fast, whether you are audible, and so on. If you have a trial like this, it will be easy to identify if there are any technical glitches that need to be checked before your webinar starts. There is a facility which can be utilized to know your audience in terms of who applied first and who applied later. This will be an indicator towards their interest level. As you proceed, you will learn the way the control panel is used to interact with your clients. Similarly, each client will have the freedom to use their mic and speakers to respond to what you are presenting. Your clients will also be able to ask questions and raise their hands if they want to ask a question or share their thoughts on the point being discussed. These websites allow you to have online feedback sessions. Software is also a great option to organize and manage your webinar. The advantage here is that everything is in your control. Now let's further explore the option which the software has in order to keep your clients engaged in the topic. As mentioned earlier, the feedback taken will reveal the success of your webinar as well as the points of improvement. Once your webinar is over, you sure will be interested in knowing how the client's responses look like. Based on the responses of the clients, reports can be generated. These reports will help you to have a clear picture on the way the webinar went. Further on, you can send follow-up mails to them to know the schedule and various other details related to the next session. You can also schedule the time and date for the automatic follow-up mails to be sent to the clients. These websites will not only help you organize your webinar by lending you the resources, but also equipped to reach out to as many people as you wish to include in your webinar. Online delivery also helps you cut down costs. A limited period may be offered by the website for using these resources And further, you can buy a plan based on your requirement.